Tashdile, this is Sakina Butt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly feature in English about this week's news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. His Holiness is keeping very well. There is nothing to worry about, says His Holiness's personal physician, Dr. Tibettv. His Holiness the Dalai Lama arrives in Lithuania. His Holiness the Dalai Lama welcomes Trump-Kim Singapore Summit initiative. His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls for inclusion of ancient Indian knowledge in education system. CTA President graces Thank You Canada event in Ottawa. US Secretary of State promises to urge China to engage in dialogue with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's representatives. Refuting false media news that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is terminally ill, personal physician to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Dr. Tibettv, said the information is absolutely false and rubbish.
How can somebody who is terminally ill and is said to be having such serious medical conditions ever engage in such busy schedules? It defies common sense, and therefore I would term this as total fake news. I want to tell all the public and those who view this news that His Holiness is keeping very well considering his age, and there's nothing to worry about.
On June 18 last year, addressing a large gathering of Tibetans in San Diego, California, His Holiness said that doctors in Rochester, Minnesota found nothing left of a small sign of cancer in his prostate gland that they had identified and treated 2 years before.
In the hospital, 그게 당시에 제위인. 그래서 저거 조선 그게 조선죠. 아니 주시님들 그게 당시에 조선님들 갖다서 또 제위. 근데 주시님 당시에 이체니. 아니 소용차도 사.
On Wednesday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama addressed a talk on human values in education at the University of Vilnius, Lithuania. Speaking to the crowd, His Holiness explained the promotion of a more peaceful world on the basis of human values of loving kindness and compassion is his primary commitment.
And whenever, you see, we find some differences, see, we should solve these differences through talk, through dialogue. That's the only way. So I usually describe this 21st century now should be century of dialogue. I think now this 21st century, in order to create peaceful century, firstly, we have to think seriously how to reduce weapon. Eventually, this world should be demilitarized world. We have power of truth. The Chinese military forces, power of gun. For temporary, power of gun is much more stronger. But long run, power of truth is much more stronger. I feel that.
His Holiness also spoke about acquiring harmonious coexistence and religious tolerance, preservation of Tibetan language and culture, and the ancient Nalanda tradition. On Wednesday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama issued a statement welcoming the Singapore Summit initiative between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on 12th June. His Holiness wrote, "It is my firm belief that dialogue is the only way to solve problems, whether between individuals or nations. As an avowed campaigner for demilitarization throughout the world and the complete elimination of nuclear weapons, I wholeheartedly welcome this historic summit to secure lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula." His Holiness the Dalai Lama called for ancient Indian traditions to be integrated with the modern education system to usher peace, understanding, and more resourceful humanity at a meeting with foreigners held in Dharamshala on Saturday last week.
Nalanda tradition, very much emphasis on logic.
His Holiness reiterated his lifelong commitment to revive the ancient Indian knowledge in modern India. He explained that while modern education brings physical comfort, the ancient Indian tradition focuses on inner well-being. He reasoned that Reintroducing these fundamental inner values in the education system purely in secular context could bring spectacular scope for lasting peace on earth. The president of Central Tibetan Administration, Dr. Lobsang Singye, left for an official visit to Canada on Sunday this week. Hosted by the Office of Tibet in North America, Dr. Singye attended the Thank You Canada event in Ottawa.
This year, 2018, is celebrated as the gratitude year because we are grateful to the government and people of Canada for supporting us. We are standing here and speaking and traveling to various places mainly because of the support of friends like you. And journey has begun 60 years ago. Journey will end sooner than you expect and be with us for a little longer.
Dr. Lobsang Singye and the delegation of Tibetan Parliament in exile appeared before the Canadian Parliament Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development on Tuesday this week.
This delegation truly reflects and represents the aspirations of 6 million Tibetans. Secondly, in the Tibetan delegation sent by China is nothing new. It has always been part of the Chinese government strategy. What we seek is support for middle way approach, which is the policy envisioned by His Holiness Dalai Lama and unanimously supported by the Tibetan Parliament, that is to seek genuine autonomy as per the Chinese constitution.
The hearing also touched upon Canada's support in Tibet through aid and development organizations, in spite of the lack of reciprocity when it comes to access and entry in Tibet for Canadian officials. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said that he will publicly ask China to engage in direct dialogue with the representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama without preconditions to resolve the Tibet issue. The Secretary of State made the statements in response to a set of written questions from members of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Secretary Pompeo also expressed his commitment to press the Chinese government to respect the legitimacy of Tibetan Buddhist religious practices. This includes the decisions of Tibetan Buddhists in selecting, educating, and venerating the lamas who lead the faith, such as the Dalai Lama. He further spoke about the implementation of the Tibetan Policy Act and added that he will urge China to cease restrictions on the human rights of Tibetans as well as their religious, linguistic and cultural traditions and practices. So much for this week. See you next time and have a great weekend.